Diamond, also called Dia, is famous among the gems for being beautiful, sparkly, and loved, like a fashion model. Their body looks colorless at first, but because of their highlight refraction, they give off rainbow sparkles and glow even at night. Even though diamond is technically the hardest gem, hardness 10, their body is actually fragile and breaks easily in battle, which is a major source of frustration for them. They used to be teammates with Bort, their younger sibling, but that partnership didn't last due to their clashing battle styles and complicated relationship. Diamond starts off sweet, kind, and gentle, but under the surface, they deal with jealousy and insecurity, especially about Bort. Dia wants to be strong like them, but struggles with constantly being compared. Over time, Diamond becomes more egotistical, especially after becoming a pop star on the moon. By then, they boss others around, demand applause, and even force Bort into a fight where both of them end up shattering each other. Diamond helps foes in battles, searches for their missing pieces after accidents, and even fights Lunarian threats like Shiro. They later go to the moon, where they discover their love for performing and start enjoying their new identity as pop idols. When Foes returns 220 years later and threatens the gems, Dia joins the plan to attack the Earth and confronts Bort directly. Their relationship with Bort gets intense, full of rivalry, bitterness, and a desire to prove themselves. After both become Lunarians, Dia tries to reconnect, but Bort wants no part of it. Yellow Diamond, or just Yellow, is the oldest and one of the fastest gems in Houseki no Kuni. They show up from the very first chapter and episode, and they've been around the longest out of all the gems. Yellow is known for their calm and mature vibe, usually acting like the older sibling of the group. Even in serious situations, they try to keep things positive and lighthearted, but underneath that, they carry a lot of guilt and self-blame, especially because all of their past partners like Green Diamond, Ruby Sapphire, and Pink Topaz were taken by the Lunarians. They're extremely fast in battle and are good at dodging attacks, but that speed didn't always help them protect their teammates. This failure haunts Yellow deeply, especially after Zircon, their current partner at the time, gets shattered trying to protect them. Yellow doesn't even know why they keep fighting anymore and struggles with feelings of worthlessness. Even though they laugh and joke with the younger gems, they secretly think of themselves as someone who just runs away. As the story progresses, Yellow helps foes recover from injuries and even refuses to partner with them because they think they'd mess things up again. They later join the trip to the moon out of guilt, hoping to apologize to all the partners they lost. When they find out that those gems were actually ground into powder, they break down, literally cracking from the shock. Yellow's mental state gets worse over time, and after a big battle and 220 years of changes, they end up believing they're a Lunarian trapped in a gem's body. Even though they stay cheerful on the surface, remembering who they really are makes them deeply sad. Yellow gets along well with the other diamond-class gems like Dia, and has a close bond with Padparadscha and Alexandrite. Neptunite mostly handles patrol duty with their partner, Benitoite. They have a pretty blunt attitude and don't really sugarcoat anything. They're known for having a sharp tongue, saying things others might think but wouldn't say out loud. For example, when Phosphophylite got turned into a slug, Neptunite flat out said Phos wasn't that useful anyway. Even though they're one of the younger gems, they've been through a lot. They help with important missions like pulling shells from the pond, collecting foes' shattered pieces, and even chasing after Lunarians. When Benitoite goes to the moon, Neptunite stays on Earth, but later shows signs they might have tried to chase the Lunarian ship into the sea. During some of the more intense scenes, they fight alongside other gems to protect the group and later help attack foes after their return. At one point, they're shattered by Padparadscha, but eventually return. Their relationship with Benitoite is interesting. Neptunite likes Benitoite, but doesn't stress about them leaving, which shows how independent both of them are. Even when asked directly, Neptunite just says, "I like them," but makes it clear that Benitoite can handle themselves. That moment kind of sums up Neptunite's whole personality: blunt, cool under pressure, and hard to read. Topaz is one of the gems who got taken by the Lunarians before the main story even began. They used to be partners with Sphene and likely did patrol duty back when they were still on Earth. According to the Pseudomorph of Love art book, Topaz had a laid-back personality, which probably made them easygoing and calm compared to some of the more high-strung characters. After being captured, Topaz shows up later on the moon with other missing gems like Chrysoberyl and Blue Zoisite. In the chapter Party at the end, you can spot them in the background, now turned into one of the Lunarians. They don't have a lot of screen time or dialogue. At some point, Topaz becomes inactive after being prayed away, which basically means they were released from existence during the Lunarian phase. Sphene is one of the older gems and works as the group's artisan. Their job is all about crafting and design, and they take it seriously. They used to be paired with Topaz, but after a winter delay, Topaz was taken by the Lunarians during spring. That loss hit Sphene hard. They felt guilty for moving on, even though a lot of time had passed. Eventually, they talked to Sensei about it and found out that Peridot, who had lost their own partner Blue Zoisite in the same battle, was dealing with the same feelings. After that talk, Sphene Sphene and Peridot became a team. Sphene is calm, sweet, and extremely focused on their work, so much that other gems say they look scary when they're concentrating. They sparkle a lot, but they'd rather just sit quietly and do woodwork. Phosphophylite worked with Sphene for a while when Sensei was trying to help Phos find a role, but it didn't work out. Later on, during the Natural Historian arc, Sphene helps Phos gather info, collect fragments, and search the ocean. In a later battle alongside Phos and Cairngorm, they got captured by a Lunarian vessel and had to be rescued. Benitoite. Benitoite is known for being a scout and a fighter, though not exactly a standout in terms of personality. They first show up right at the start of the series and are known by the nickname Benito. They're one of the more reserved gems, often seen helping others, but rarely making a strong impression themselves. They're the type who can't say no when someone needs help, but also tend to get dragged into situations easily. They even sleep next to Cinnabar's room, but admit they feel uneasy because of Cinnabar's poisonous body. Benitoite often struggles with feelings of being average or boring and openly wishes to be more unique, even saying they wanted to go to the moon just to feel special like Phosphophylite. They were teamed up with Neptunite, but didn't fully get along. Benitoite found them hard to understand and even wanted space from them. Still, despite being unsure of themselves, they took part in all the big events, helping search for Phos after they were lost at sea, joining the other gems in winter hibernation, and later going to the moon with Phos. One of the most chaotic moments involving Benitoite was when Alexandrite, who loses control when they see Lunarians, dragged Benito into a violent attack on the Earth gems. Benitoite tried to stop Alex, but ended up getting their head torn off in the mess. It's unclear if they survived, but they're assumed to have been restored later and possibly became a Lunarian too. Antarcticite, also called Antarc, is the winter exclusive gem. Because of how their mineral works, they only show up when temperatures drop really low, otherwise they're literally melted in liquid form. Once it's cold enough, they crystallize, suit up, and take over winter duties while the other gems hibernate. Antarc is serious, strict, and acts like a soldier. Super formal, super focused. They don't really know how to work with others because they're used to being the only one awake, but they get paired up with Phosphophylite one winter when Phos decides not to hibernate. At first, Antarc sees Phos as a burden and doesn't hide it. They call Phos useless, judge them harshly, and even try to push them to go back to sleep. But over time, Antarc starts to train and support Phos, even though Phos keeps messing up. Despite being blunt, Antarc is actually really kind deep down. Antarc's sword is unique too. It's not a regular blade, but a jagged, saw-like weapon that doubles as a snowboard. They need it for smashing dangerous ice floes, which aren't monsters but loud, creepy chunks of ice that disturb the sleeping gems. These ice floes sometimes whisper, and Phos freaks out when they start hearing actual words. Antarc, though, explains that's just noise from the minerals, not real talking. One moment that really hits hard is when Phos falls into the ocean, loses their arms, and Antarc dives in to try to retrieve them. They blame themselves for the accident and are visibly shaken. Later, they help Phos search for replacement arms at the shore of Nascency, where they run into a new type of Lunarian. Antarc fights bravely, even slicing through one of them, but ends up ambushed and shattered by another. Right before being taken away, they tell Phos to make sure Sensei, Kongo, isn't lonely during the winter. After Antarc is taken, their presence continues to affect Phos deeply. Phos has hallucinations of Antarc and remembers their teachings and their loss constantly. Eventually, Antarc is restored on the moon and becomes a Lunarian. They reunite with Kongo and find out what happened while they were gone. At first, they resent Phos for something Phos said about Kongo, but later forgive them. Antarc's last moments are some of the most emotional in the series, and their loss changes Phos forever. Amethyst. Amethyst is actually two gems in one, twin siblings known as 84 and 33. They work mainly as patrol fighters and are often seen together, doing everything in sync, talking at the same time, finishing each other's sentences, and fighting side by side with swords. They're strong, skilled, and a bit playful, often teasing younger gems like Phosphophylite, but they're also very kind and gentle at heart. They first show up early in the story when Phos is paired with them to learn sword fighting. Even though they're confident and experienced, they end up getting shattered in battle while trying to show off, which makes Phos feel guilty. But instead of blaming Phos, they apologize, saying it was their own carelessness. Later, they're impressed by how much stronger Phos has become and proudly hug them after seeing their new skills. Over time, the twins start to develop more individual identities. 84 ends up working on the moon as an assistant scientist, diving into psychological research and pointing out how the gems never got proper emotional care back on Earth. 33, still on Earth, believes their twin is doing okay and continues to feel connected to them even after being apart for 200 years. Bort. Bort is one of the strongest and most feared gems. They're part of the Diamond class, but unlike Diamond, Bort's body is made of tiny crystal grains. This makes them super tough. Hard hits don't spread through their body the same way, so they can take a lot of damage without shattering easily. They're known for being silent, serious, and totally obsessed with battle. When a fight breaks out, everyone else relaxes if Bort's on the scene. because they know things are under control. Even though Bort seems cold and ruthless, they actually care a lot more than they let on. They scold other gems when they fight recklessly, especially Diamond, who used to be their longtime partner. Their relationship gets more distant later, especially after Diamond moves to the moon. Bort stays behind on Earth, but they never stop fighting and pushing themselves to be better. Bort also had a short partnership with Phos, and later with Zircon. At first, Bort didn't say a word to Zircon, which made Zircon super nervous. But once Bort gave them blunt advice, Zircon realized Bort was just trying to help them improve. They also formed a new bond with Cinnabar, pulling them into the group and even defending them when Cinnabar's mercury accidentally hurt Bort. One of the rare times Bort let their guard down was when they reacted to the Shiro puppies. They actually cracked a bit just from how cute they were. In battle, Bort is a total beast. They fought everything from Lunarians to new types of enemies with weird abilities. Later in the story, they even used their long hair like a whip to shatter enemies, including Phos twice. Over time, though, Bort starts to burn out. They're still strong, but they seem tired of constant fighting. They say they don't enjoy it anymore. It's just something they had to do. After being shattered in a final fight and taken to the moon, Bort gets revived as a Lunarian, Rutile. Rutile is the gem's doctor, and they take their job way too seriously. They're usually seen working non-stop or passed out from exhaustion, surrounded by herbs, powders, boxes, and medical tools. Rutile doesn't mess around when it comes to their medical work, and they've done over 300,000 surgeries trying to fix one gem. Padparadscha, their partner, who's been asleep for centuries due to a broken body. Most of what Rutile does revolves around trying to wake them up. They're super smart, stubborn, and kind of sarcastic. They love dissecting things, animals, weird creatures, even the puppy, like pieces of Shiro, and they hate when anyone questions their authority. They're also the one who explains a lot about the gem's biology, like how inclusions inside their bodies keep them alive, and how memory is stored throughout their body, which means losing a piece means losing memories. Rutile helped fix almost every gem at some point, especially Phos, who constantly needed repairs. At one point, Rutile even considered using Phos's parts on Padparadscha if the repairs didn't work. Things get bad for Rutile after Phos takes Padparadscha to the moon. Rutile finds their room empty, loses it, and starts to crack, literally and mentally. They stop caring about being a doctor, let their hair go messy, and become unstable and angry. They even attack Phos and later try to destroy them before being stopped by Padparadscha, who shows up just in time. At that point, Rutile is so broken emotionally that they cling to a single shard of Padparadscha like it's all they have left. They don't talk much anymore, and it's clear they're not the same. Eventually, Rutile gets shattered during Phos's final invasion, but is later revived as a Lunarian like the others. They finally calm down and end up working as a therapist for Lunarians, which is kind of wild considering how obsessed and emotionally wrecked they were before. Cinnabar. Cinnabar is one of the most complicated and unique characters. They're known for their bright red color and gloomy attitude, but what really sets them apart is the mercury that constantly leaks from their body. That mercury is super toxic, not just to other gems, but to all life. So Cinnabar keeps their distance from everyone and does night patrols alone. They actually came up with the idea of patrolling at night by themselves, since the mercury reflects even the faintest light and keeps them awake anyway. The problem is, no one really attacks at night, so the job's kind of pointless. Even worse, Cinnabar hates fighting, hates being seen, and mostly just wants to disappear, even hoping the Lunarians might one day take them away and give them a purpose. They don't have any close friends at first, but everything starts to shift when Phosphophylite promises to find them a better job, something fun that only they can do. Cinnabar doesn't really believe them, but holds on to that tiny bit of hope. Despite all their self-loathing, they're smart and observant. They help Phos out multiple times, like during the Lunarian attacks or when Phos turns into a slug. They're often annoyed by Phos but still care, even picking up and holding on to their notebook for years. That hope for a new purpose kind of turns into a bigger role later, as they start helping Phos investigate the truth about their teacher Congo. Over time, Cinnabar gets pulled deeper into the main conflict. They work with Bort during big battles, and even go toe-to-toe with Phos in one of the most intense fights in the series. When Phos shatters them, Cinnabar actually thanks them for keeping the promise, because that ended up being the thing that helped them connect with others and finally stop being alone. After their defeat, they're restored as a Lunarian and find peace as a florist on the moon, finally able to touch delicate things without harming them. At the end of the story, like all the other gems and Lunarians, they're prayed away by Phos. Zircon. Zircon is one of the younger gems and is known for being super hardworking, but also really anxious. They used to be the partner of Yellow Diamond, who they totally admired and respected. Zircon would constantly put themselves in danger just to protect Yellow, even though Yellow is way tougher and didn't need that kind of help. Because of this, Zircon was often shattered in battles, especially during fights with the Lunarians. They were always loyal, calling Yellow Senpai, and it was obvious they looked up to them more than anyone else. Later on, Zircon got paired with Bort, which totally shook them up. As you know, Bort is one of the strongest gems and barely speaks, so at first Zircon thought Bort hated them. It took a while, but Zircon learned that Bort just doesn't talk unless it's necessary. That helped them get better at working together. But Bort also gave Zircon some blunt advice. Stop throwing yourself in front of danger to protect people who don't need saving. Bort basically told them to focus on their own safety instead of acting like a shield for others. As the story goes on, Zircon helps with some major events, searching for Phos's lost parts, fighting Lunarians, helping break up ice flows, and even standing up to Yellow Diamond at one point when Phos returns. Zircon doesn't go to the moon and stays on Earth with the other gems. They help during the big fights when Phos comes back multiple times, including the plan to shatter and hide Phos's body to keep them from being used by the Lunarians. Euclase. Euclase is one of the more responsible and intelligent gems. They act as a secretary and take care of strategy, planning, math, and even weather reporting. They're not just organized, they're an all-rounder who's good at everything, from tracking enemy patterns to predicting weather with over 80% accuracy. They know every gem's exact age and love finding patterns in all kinds of things. Even though they have a quiet and calm personality, they're the one quietly holding most of the authority while letting Jade take the spotlight as the leader. They've also been around for at least 2,000 years, so they've seen a lot. At the start of the story, Euclase shows their quick thinking when a giant slug swallows Phos. They try to attack it, but their blade melts. After the fight, they help recover Phos's pieces. Later, they get suspicious when Phos starts acting strangely after returning from the moon. Euclase is one of the few gems who doesn't jump straight to violence and instead tries to talk things out. When Phos returns and half the gems decide to leave for the moon, Euclase is clearly hurt but still supports Sensei, asking if they can all start over instead of abandoning him. Later on, when Phos comes back again and violence breaks out, Euclase is calm, even asking Phos gently, "This isn't what you wanted, is it?" But just when things might have settled, Phos gets stabbed and taken away again. It's revealed that Euclase actually planned the defense and found Phos's weak spot. Even then, they still didn't want more fighting. On Phos's third return, Euclase acts like a middle ground between Phos and the others. They ask everyone to let Phos speak, but the group decides to attack instead. After Phos is shattered, Euclase keeps their request alive by asking Sensei to pray for the next 220 years, slowly forgetting Phos over time. When Phos finally wakes up again, Euclase is the first one to respond, which causes Phos to hesitate. That moment gives Bort enough time to attack. Eventually, Euclase is shattered too, but after being restored on the moon, they agree to become a Lunarian. They then take on a major role in the moon's administration, going to tons of meetings every day for the next 10,000 years. Red Beryl. Red Beryl is mainly responsible for creating and designing clothing for the other gems. Their role is specifically that of a tailor and fashion stylist. Red Beryl is highly passionate about their work. They are not easily upset, even when their work is taken without permission. For example, when Phosphophylite stole a prototype underwater uniform, Red Beryl used the situation to make improvements using Phos as a model. They are known to give a repeated speech about the value of art and fashion every year, indicating a strong belief in their craft. They also contributed by making seasonal clothes such as kimono robes and hair accessories for winter hibernation. After a battle with Shiro, they crafted a Shiro doll for Diamond, which became popular. During later events, they struggled to focus on work when Phos invited them to the moon. They chose to stay on Earth but were shown broken, implying they chased the departing ship. They later helped reassemble Padparadscha, but were shattered while trying to calm down a transformed Alexandrite. Phosphophylite. Phosphophylite, or Phos for short, is the main character and starts out as the youngest and weakest of the gems, with a hardness of only 3.5. They're brittle, clumsy, and pretty much useless in battle, which is all they ever wanted to do. Because they couldn't fight, they were given the task of creating a natural history encyclopedia, something they struggled with like pretty much everything else. Early on, they made a promise to help Cinnabar find a job that wouldn't isolate them. That promise becomes a major driving force for Phos. Over time, Phos changes more than any other gem, both physically and emotionally. After being swallowed by a snail, they lost their legs but gained faster, stronger replacements made from agate, thanks to Ventricosus, the Admirabilis queen. Later they lost their arms too and got new ones made from gold and platinum alloy, which made their bodies stronger and gave them crazy new powers like fluid weaponry. These constant upgrades made Phos more capable in battle, but they also chipped away at who they originally were. They even changed their hairstyle to look like Antarcticite, who was their winter partner, and whose loss hit them really hard. Phos' relationship with the other gems shifts as well. Some start to respect them, others grow wary. For example, Bort, who used to call them scrap, later teamed up with them, only to end up attacking them again later when tensions rose. The turning point is when Phos starts suspecting Congo, the gem's leader, might be connected to the Lunarians. This suspicion pushes Phos to go to the moon. where they learn that Congo is actually a machine designed by humans to pray for the Lunarians' salvation. That discovery drives Phos to the edge, and they become obsessed with forcing Congo to complete his function. As they keep losing parts of their body and replacing them with new materials, the show raises the question, how much of the original Phos is left? Is Phos still the same person? It's the ship of Theseus idea, where if you replace something piece by piece, does it remain the same thing? Most of Phos' original body is gone, and eventually, so is a lot of their personality. By the end, they're barely recognized by their fellow gems. Even those who once cared for them, like Cinnabar and Diamond, start to see them more as an enemy than a friend. What's wild is that Phos actually becomes godlike by the end. Their transformation is so extreme that they stop being just a gem. But even after reaching that point, they still struggle with their original purpose and emotions. One of the most heartbreaking scenes is when Phos, after being shattered and isolated for centuries, begs Congo to pray just for them, to end their suffering, not for the Lunarians. And even then, Congo can't do it. Throughout the series, Phos reflects symptoms of PTSD and depression, especially after losing Antarctic. They suffer from hallucinations, mood swings, self-blame, and a sense of emptiness. Even though gems don't usually change, Phos breaks that rule, both physically and mentally. They're a tragic character who just wanted to be useful, but ended up carrying more pain than anyone else. Padparadscha. Padparadscha is one of the most interesting and tragic gems. They're a rare gem born with an incomplete torso, which means they're unconscious most of the time. Rutile has spent centuries trying to fix them by filling in the missing parts, but it never lasted long. Padpa would only wake up for short bursts. When they finally wake up again after 231 years, their body is still full of holes, and their shirt stays open to show it. They also seem to know more than they let on, like when they tell Phos to be careful about learning the truth, saying it could change everything. They also secretly want Rutile to stop trying to fix them, but they're scared of how Rutile would react. Their connection with Phos is also deep. Both have unstable bodies, and Padpa even uses themselves as a distraction to help Phos escape. Later, Phos brings Padpa to the moon to help Rutile move on. Echmea fixes them using synthetic Padparadscha pieces, and for the first time, their body feels fully functional. But even after being fixed, their personality changes during the night raid. They go from being kind and caring to cold and ruthless, even attacking old friends like Rutile. In a later arc, they sacrifice themselves again to help Phos, pulling a chunk out of their own chest so Phos can escape Rutile. Morganite. Morganite shows up right from the start of the story and is usually paired up with Goshenite on patrol duty. Morga is kinda reckless. They once decided to take on a sunspot without telling their teacher, Congo, which ended badly when they got shattered and nearly taken by the Lunarians. Morga tends to make bold decisions without thinking them through, which often puts them and Goshenite in trouble. They're not exactly the most patient or friendly gem, especially with Phosphophylite. Morga often teases Phos and gets annoyed by their lack of progress. There's a scene where Phos tries to help fix Morga, but apparently messed up so badly that Morga ended up with their legs swapped. Morga made it clear they didn't want any more of that kind of help. One funny moment is when Diamond brings a slug, which is actually Phos in a weird transformed state, to Morga, and Morga says the slug is gross but well behaved. Right before it attacks them. They're made of a gemstone called Morganite, which is a pink variety of beryl, same family as emeralds. That's why they're partnered with Goshenite, who's another type of beryl. Also, fun fact, Morganite is actually named after J.P. Morgan, the famous banker. Jade. Jade is one of the more serious and responsible gems. Right from the start of the series, they've been known as the chairman because they often speak on behalf of Congo-sensei. They take their duties seriously, sometimes too seriously, which is why others joke that being president just means doing all the chores. Jade is partnered with Euclase during patrols and plays a support role both in battle and decision-making. They're the second toughest gem after Bort, and they're also known for fighting with their fists instead of weapons, which is rare among the gems. Throughout the story, Jade is constantly caught in stressful situations, rescuing teammates, dealing with Phos' unpredictable actions, or trying to wake up Congo, which they say is harder than fighting Lunarians. They were part of the group trying to save Morganite and Goshenite, helped chip Phos out of a shell after an encounter with Ventricosus, and tried to stop Phos when their new alloy body started falling apart. Even though they don't always understand Phos, Jade keeps showing up when it matters. Later in the series, as Phos becomes more distant and starts pushing boundaries, Jade shifts from being a leader to more of a bodyguard for Congo, standing by his side in tough moments. Eventually, Jade is involved in the final battle where Phos returns again. During that fight, Phos calls them out for fearing the night, and Jade responds by apologizing for never understanding Phos. It's one of the few times Jade opens up emotionally. They're later taken to the moon with the other gems, turned into a Lunarian, and eventually prayed away by Phos after thousands of years. Goshenite. Goshenite is one of the clearer-headed gems. They patrol with Morganite, and while Morga tends to be impulsive and loud, Gosh balances that out by being more thoughtful and cautious. In their first major scene, Goshenite and Morganite fight Lunarians who suddenly start using arrows tipped with what Gosh realizes are shards of Heliodor, a captured gem. The two try to save what they can but end up completely shattered, losing all limbs in the process. Congo shows up just in time to stop the Lunarians and recover their broken pieces, although his booming voice ends up cracking them even more. Back at the school, Rutile patches them up, and Gosh asks if Heliodor can be revived if all their pieces are found. Even though Gosh's main job is to patrol the skies, they try to help Phos with their encyclopedia project, even if they're not much help beyond general ideas. They once joked about swapping roles with Phos and offering them their sword, but quickly regretted it when Phos actually tried to accept. Later, Gosh helps gather Phos's fragments after the whole snail body situation and joins the group that searches for Phos when they go missing at sea. Gosh stays present through major events like Phos replacing Antarctic, Phos's head being swapped with Lapis Lazuli's, and the shift in leadership. 20 years later, they're captured with Morga by the Lunarians, ground into dust, and scattered across the moon. Eventually, they're revived during the Gem Restoration Project and turned into a Lunarian like many others.